I just want to ask you one Caleb question. What is something about him that fans or media don't see, but you get to see every day?
He works at it. He works at it really hard. I've seen him progress from spring to right now, and I think that he's going to continue to progress. He's out there, whether it's a success or a failure. He's very attentive in meeting rooms. He wants to get it right, and that's the biggest thing that I've seen, a guy that wants to be a great quarterback.
Welcome in. It is the Tuesday, August 12th edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. It is a Tuesday. That means we have a special Spotlight guest of the week. And today we will be joined by Chicago Bears offensive coordinator Declan Doyle, hired this offseason by Ben Johnson, making him the youngest offensive coordinator in the NFL. And this is somebody who has had a rapid rise in the NFL, very, very sharp, very, very bright, somebody who is mature beyond his years, and somebody who Ben Johnson is trusting in helping him throughout the upcoming season with Caleb Williams. And he has been around some of the most brilliant minds in football, including Sean Payton from New Orleans to eventually in Denver. And now, of course, he ends up in Chicago with Ben Johnson, with one of the great franchises in the NFL, and trying to make them one of the great offenses with all the great pieces that they have. A fascinating conversation with a very, very interesting person who you'll definitely be hearing a lot more of over here this season and in the coming years in the NFL as he continues his rise. So here it is, my full 30-minute discussion with Chicago Bears offensive coordinator Declan Doyle. Joining us today here on NFL Spotlight, he was hired this offseason as the new offensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears, one of the storied franchises in the NFL, getting to work with one of the brilliant offensive minds in the NFL in Ben Johnson. It is Declan Doyle. Declan, what's going on? Really appreciate you doing this.
How you doing? Thank you for having me on.
For sure. And, Declan, you were hired this offseason. Your story is a very, very cool one. You've had a fast rise here in the NFL, and now you're an offensive coordinator. But here on the NFL Spotlight Show, we love going through people's careers and journeys and paths. And how did you get to where you are today? And I kind of want to go back to your start. You're an Iowa kid who's an offensive coordinator now in the NFL. But before football, I feel like your first love might have been baseball. I mean, you were a team captain at Iowa Western. You played in the state title game. You were a captain. You were participated in the perfect game invite before the MLB draft. You loved David Ortiz, the Red Sox. I mean, you're all in on baseball. Was that ever in consideration growing up? And how did football eventually become the thing for you?
Yeah, you're very well researched. So I always knew I wanted to coach. I was better at baseball than I was at football. And so that was kind of the path I pursued. I grew up around Iowa football as a kid. And so that was something that interested me more. But as I said, I was better at baseball, so I kind of pursued that path. I went and played college baseball for 2 years, and I kind of hit a stopping point where it was like, okay, I can go, pursue this further, knowing that I probably didn't have what it took to go play professionally for 2 more years, or I can make this transition. And just so happened a job opened up as a student assistant at the University of Iowa, and so that was kind of the path that I chose to really flip a switch and go into football. And I really put everything I had into it, and I was just like, hey, I'm going to give it all I got. And if it's, if it doesn't go anywhere from here, at least I know that I gave it everything I had. And so that was kind of the thought behind the decision to go coach football.
At what point did you realize that coaching was a passion you had? And I guess, how did you choose football over maybe becoming a baseball coach or position coach there? Like, how did you end up choosing football and deciding that path?
Yeah, I have 2 parents that are really teachers. My father was a coach, and then my mom's a math teacher. So that was always something I was passionate about, helping people and the relationships you build, and helping somebody achieve, something that they couldn't achieve on their own. So that was always a passion of mine. The football schematics were always of interest to me, even as a young kid. That was something that I remember being a little kid and walking into the GA's office, and they gave me they gave me like old playbook pages and writing on them and stuff as a little kid. So that was always something I was passionate about. All the people that I looked up to were football coaches. And so that was really the, why I wanted to go into it. And, it's such a deep game, because to the naked eye, like, a fan can watch the game and really enjoy what's happening, but it's so deep that I can study it for my whole life and never really get to the bottom of it. And so there's certainly a love for the beauty of the sport.
One of the things that we love doing here on the show is finding out how people got their foot in the door. That's usually all that matters in the beginning. How did that happen for you where in 2016 you transferred to Iowa and become a student offensive assistant there for the football program? But how did that door open for you where now you're at least in it?
At the University of Iowa.
Yeah.
So they had an opening, and there weren't really a lot of people that were applying for it. It's kind of like that bottom of the ranked job. So you go in, you kind of learn film breakdown, drawing, helping out on the field, but you really can't coach quite yet. The room that I walked into, I was really fortunate. There were 3 really good tight ends. I wasn't really coaching them. I was just learning. But George Kittle's in that room, TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant. And so you walk into a room of guys that were really talented. And so I got to watch kind of that process from, inside the building, but not really being able to direct it quite yet. That was, how I got my foot in the door that way. And then I really just tried to learn everything from the very start. And the more I did, the more responsibility I was given. And so by the time, 2017, 2018, I had a bigger role in that building.
You mentioned how when you got there, you were literally at the bottom of the total poll. How did you, you mentioned how you were going to go all in. This is what I wanted to do. But how did you handle that challenge of starting from quite literally the bottom? And did you ever have any doubts that this might be a little bit too difficult?
I never had any doubts because it was something that I was really passionate about. And I didn't have a vision of what the top looked like or where I was going. It was just like enjoying going into work every day and learning. The very first day I'm there, I'm learning fronts and coverages and how we're going to break stuff down. And the deeper you get into it, there's just really no bottom to the knowledge you can gain doing the job. And so that was what was the most enjoyable part about going in every day. And so, there was no hesitation in I'm doing the right thing because I really enjoyed what I was doing every day.
When you were there for 3 years, Iowa went to bowl games all 3 years. Was there a specific moment during those years where you knew with certainty that this was your calling? Was there any specific person who kind of helped you and guided you in and told you like, hey, I feel like you could really like make this into your living and really continue climbing up the ladder?
Yeah, I don't know if there was one moment. I think there was a bunch of moments that, you're on the field and you're able to help somebody. You're able to coach somebody up and they go out and they have success. And I think any coach or any teacher has that feeling of like, okay, we're doing this together and you're proud of somebody for doing it. And I think there were a number of people in that building that I looked up to that were really influential in my growth. As there were people in New Orleans and Denver, same thing. But to get to the job that I'm currently in, there's so many people that have influenced me in a positive way that, I can't really pick, one out.
Now, you mentioned your NFL stops with New Orleans and Denver and now Chicago. How did you start making inroads into the NFL world? Because in 2019, you are hired by the Saints as an offensive assistant to join Sean Payton and Drew Brees and this high-powered offense. How did that relationship come about that you're making this big jump into the NFL world now?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Brendan Nugent, who is now the O-line coach back at the Saints, so he's kind of been around the circle and now he's back. He was a student assistant when I was a kid at Iowa. And so it's kind of this like long path. He didn't know me at all as a coach. In 2017, it was like my junior year of college. I'm getting ready to go into my senior year. I knew that I wanted to try to advance and try to be a quality control coach in the NFL. And so it was either that I could go GA at another, a bigger Division I school, or I could try to go, to an FCS school. And so I started reaching out to people that I knew from way back in the day. And there were a number of people that kind of got back to me. I was making, $7,000 at Iowa as a student assistant. I was working probably 100 hours a week and not really making any money. But I really felt like it was a priority to try to visit some of these teams during OTAs and try to get FaceTime, but also, I had spent a ton of time watching the Saints on tape. And so I visited the Saints, I visited the Chiefs, and I visited the Texans and kind of paid my own way to go down there. I was there for 2 days. I stayed with Nuge. I actually was in Dan Campbell's meeting room for the couple days that I was down there. And so I got exposed to Dan a little bit and the rest of the offensive staff. But when I went down there in 17, Joe Brady, who was the coordinator at the Bills, was working as the quality control coach. And so I went down there with a bunch of questions about stuff that I had seen on tape and kind of peppered a number of people on the staff about some of that stuff. And, fast forward 2 years later, Joe goes to LSU. And so that job kind of opened up and I reached out to Brendan Nugent and I was like, hey, if you could put my hat in the ring for this job, that'd be great. I know that they had a number of people that, all the time, there's a number of people that want to get in and, they interviewed a few people. They really interviewed 4 people. And I was fortunate to be able to get the job and go down there and really, couldn't have been in a better situation with, New Orleans in 2019 had success in 17 and 18. 18 was the no-call game with the Rams. And so I get in the building at a time where they're really talented. We're kind of at the end of the Drew Brees years. And the coaching staff was phenomenal. You look at that staff, obviously it's Sean, the 2 guys that were really influential in the role that I have now, Pete Carmichael and Joe Lombardi, who have both been coordinators for Sean. And then you look at the rest of the staff. I mean, it's Dennis Allen, head coach, Aaron Glenn, Dan Campbell. Dan Rochar, who's now our O-line coach here, couldn't have been more fortunate to be around a great group of people. And then really to be in there with, at those ending years of Drew, where you're in offensive game plan meetings and he's the highest level processor that you're going to be around. And so being able to see the game and have to learn the game from, not really like you're not learning addition, you're learning calculus and you got to learn it fast or you're not going to keep up with the quarterback. And so, really fortunate to go into a system that was rolling and offensively, from a professional standpoint, couldn't have landed in a better spot.
Your official role there, being around all these people, was offensive assistant. That's not necessarily a position group. That's basically doing whatever you're kind of told. What were your responsibilities when you were there and working with all these brilliant minds offensively, defensively, and of course, those amazing players led by Drew? Like, what was your official day-to-day there?
So I drew the run game. So everybody, there's a couple people. One draws the passes, one draws the runs. I drew all the runs for all 4 years I was there. I coached the scout teams on both sides of the ball, so offense and defense. Kind of handled all the administrative stuff for the offense. So practice scripts, call sheets, things like that. Trying to make sure that everything, worked smoothly. And then really the biggest challenge was, you break down games, like as you break down film and you're watching teams, we broke down everything. So there might be, by week 8, I might have broken down 24 games on an opponent. And really the best thing about that job was, they kind of lock you in a room and force you to learn football, and you force you to learn X's and O's, and you get exposed to scheme at the NFL across the board. All teams, we kind of have crossover with. And so those were really the responsibilities. My first year I was with the offensive line. And so that was really beneficial to me because I was drawing the run game. I got to spend time with Dan Rochar and really learn the intricacies of how we were going to teach, the run game, the pass game, the protections, things like that. When I was in there, I really missed, those guys focus kind of in that interior box. And I really missed the other stuff. I missed the pass game. I missed, how it all ties together. And so in that second year, I transitioned and I went into the tight end room with Dan Campbell. And so I was with Dan for a year. And then the following 2 years after that, I was also in the tight end room and kind of, I got to coach more as I was there and understood the system. You kind of knew the why behind what we were doing. But that was kind of the journey there in New Orleans.
While you were there, like you're coming from, being in Iowa to an NFL world, what was your just first impression of meeting a Sean Payton and meeting a Drew Brees and meeting some of these legends of the game and frankly, probably the best head coach quarterback duo we had in our era?
Yeah. I mean, I was really young when I got there, right? I'm 22. And so I've been watching Drew Brees and Sean Payton since I was a kid. And so the first time you meet him, you're like starstruck. You're like, oh, like this is Sean Payton. And pretty quickly that just becomes your everyday life. And these are the people that you work with. They just become your coworkers. So absolutely, it was a little bit surreal walking in initially. but eventually it just becomes, this is what we do, and we're all working in the same direction for the same goal, and we're trying to win.
Well, during your time there in New Orleans, like you said, the offense was insane. In 2019, in fact, the offense had just 8 turnovers that season, which is insane to think about. Um, Eventually, Sean takes a year off, and then he comes back a year later and goes to Denver, and he brings you along with you to become the tight ends coach. What was your reaction when you get that call? Sean wants you back, and now it's not doing necessarily everything, but it's like you're in a position room working with the tight ends only.
Yeah, I think anytime you're in a role, you're preparing for whatever that next role is, yeah, by doing what you're doing. So I was preparing to be the tight end coach when I was in New Orleans for those last 3 years. And like anybody who gets a new job or a promotion, you get that big break, you get that phone call, and you're really excited. But the biggest thing was the learning how to run a room, how to stand up and deal with. Anybody can stand up when it's going well, but when it's not going good, when you're the Denver Broncos and you're 1-5, you got to stand up in front of that tight end room and lead and get those guys on the same page and say, listen, like, we're not out of it. We have to get back to our process. And so I was very excited to go with Sean. He's somebody that twice, he's pulled me from relative anonymity at Iowa once and then in New Orleans and given me promotions. He's somebody that has invested in me. And so obviously I was really excited to join him and the Broncos staff.
Well, you've mentioned his name a couple of times now, but in New Orleans, the tight end coach was a man named Dan Campbell, who is now an unbelievable head coach in Detroit. What did you learn from being around Dan to get ready to become a tight ends coach in Denver?
Be yourself. Like, Dan is unbelievably authentic. It's the reason why players like playing for him. That was the biggest thing. I watched him lead a room in New Orleans, and those guys were so bought in. He's an emotional guy. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He cares about people, and all those things are great lessons to be taken in any job.
I look through now, you were there for Denver for a couple of years. They obviously had unbelievable success last year, unexpected success in the national media to see them go into the postseason. And then this offseason comes around. Ben Johnson is the hottest head coach candidate there is this offseason. He gets hired in Chicago, and he handpicks you as the offensive coordinator to be with him. How did that all happen? Did you know Ben previously? Like, what was that entire process like?
Yeah, I interviewed with Ben for the tight ends job after my 3rd year in New Orleans. And so Ben was going to be a first-year offensive coordinator and play caller in Detroit. And obviously I had the relationship with Dan Campbell, and so he was searching for names, but I got to go up there and interview. And I interviewed with their staff. Coach Randall, who's now our assistant head coach, was in there, and they kind of put me through this process with everybody in there. And I felt like it went well. Like, anytime you interview, you know what it feels like to feel like you did a good job. But the entire time, Ben's sitting at the head of the table, and he was grilling me. Like, Ben is incredibly detailed. He's a clear communicator, but everything that I put up there, it was why. Why do you do that? What do you like it against? And so I finished the interview, and I was like, I think that went well. I think I could get this job, but I think that guy hates me. I don't think that guy likes me very much. And so it kind of finishes, I was able to, I didn't get that job. Tanner Engstrom gets promoted. Johnny Morton, who's now their coordinator in Detroit, he gets hired as the pass game coordinator there. And so I stay in New Orleans for one more year. And I was fortunate to work with Johnny in Denver. So it all kind of comes full circle. But, I don't get that job, and I was able to kind of stay in touch with Ben. I think that after the interview, we were able to kind of talk, and, we saw things very similarly as far as, how you run an offense and, some of the schematic things and the details and all of that. And that was really where the connection was made. And then it kind of, we just stayed in touch after that.
Was a very big hire for him because, you've been around Sean in New Orleans and Denver, where he was both the head coach and the play caller. Ben is going to do the same thing here in Chicago. But as you know, a head coach literally gets pulled in a billion different directions over the course of a week. He's entrusted you in doing all the stuff throughout the week leading up to a Sunday. What does that look like for you during the course of a week, preparing him as he gets ready for his play calling duties on Sunday?
Yeah. So as we get into the season, we'll start to really hash out exactly what the responsibilities are. The biggest thing is we got to get a jump start on the tape, me and the rest of the staff. So we'll get a jump start on it. We'll start to prepare the game plan the way he would have when he was the coordinator. He's going to be handling some other responsibilities. And then when he's able to kind of transition back over to play caller, we have organized, the thoughts on how we're going to attack this defense, what kind of plays we want to run conceptually, and then, who do we need to feed the ball to? How is this defense going to view us from, what we're doing, and really set the table so that he can walk in and there's work already done, not he has to start from scratch. So the biggest thing is we're trying to save as much time for him as we possibly can. And obviously I'm spearheading that. I'm trying to orchestrating the rest of the staff, but we got to use our resources to try to make his life not as easy as possible, but just try to set him up for as much success as we possibly can.
There are endless stories out there of head coaches, new head coaches, just having stuff pop up on their desk all of a sudden, and now they have to go somewhere else. And that's where all these behind the scenes people, including yourself now, are going to be helping Ben a lot throughout the course of a season. And Ben actually mentioned this recently, that you and him are like a match made in heaven, which is very high praise. What does it mean to you that already you have that much trust with him? And how has it been so far working so closely with him? Because like you mentioned, his attention to detail is quite crazy.
Yeah, Ben is as good as it gets. Ben is an unbelievable teacher. He's a really good communicator. And the biggest thing with him is he doesn't let any detail slip. And that trickles down to every level of the organization, the players, everybody else that he comes into contact with. That's the expectation, and that's the standard. And so obviously, he's somebody that I've looked up to from afar for a while. I've watched them operate in Detroit for 3 years. I studied them every year from a schematic standpoint, but to be around him and be around the rest of our staff, I feel so unbelievably fortunate. It just rubs off on, you and I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be with all of our guys and be working in for a common goal.
Ben was obviously in Detroit, worked with a veteran quarterback in Jared, who was a former #1 overall pick. You were in Denver the last 2 years. Last year, with a rookie in Bo Nix, who was outstanding. Are there any lessons that you learned from building around a young quarterback that you saw Sean apply and Davis Webb and an entire offensive staff that now you could apply working with a young guy in Caleb Williams?
Yeah, you try to shape the offense around the player. We've tried to really give him a lot initially and really see what he can handle. And then from there, it's our job to shape it so that he has success. And so kind of narrowing in on, all right, what are we good at? What do we want to be doing here? What do we not want to mess with that might have been good with a different quarterback that may not fit our guy quite as well? And that's the biggest thing, is constantly evaluating and constantly watching the tape. Are we going to be able to perform at a championship standard, running this play or this concept, or asking this player to do something? And so, that's the biggest thing, is just making sure you're paying attention to it and shaping it around them.
I just want to ask you one Caleb question, because there's just so much attention with him coming into the NFL and the talent that he was, and there's all these different crazy narratives about him. You've been around him. What is something about him that fans or media don't see, but you get to see every day, that people just do not know?
He works at it. He works at it really hard. It's important to him. And, I've seen him progress from spring to right now. And I think that he's going to continue to progress as, he continues to stress himself and grow. And, he's out there, whether it's a success or a failure, he's very attentive in meeting rooms. He wants to get it right. And that's the biggest thing that I've seen, a guy that wants to, be a great quarterback.
I have one more Bears question here before I get to a couple more things about you, because I want to get to just some general questions about just your life and everything. But as a former tight ends coach, it probably got you pretty excited that the first round pick that Ben and Ryan Poles made this year was a tight end in Colston Loveland. What has it been like to be around him so far and see the potential talent that he has going into his rookie year?
Colston sees the game from a very high football intelligence lens. Like he knows, really what he's looking at. He understands leverage. He understands the passing game well. He is very well informed as far as the run game stuff. I think they did a great job with him at Michigan at teaching him and getting him to a point where he was ready for the NFL. And I've really enjoyed being around him. He's very serious. He loves football, and he's really, he's the first pick that we made as an organization here with Ben. And I think he embodies a lot of the things that we're looking for in players that we want to play for us.
There's actually one more play I want to bring up here, and you probably were not expecting to hear this name in the interview, but I think one of the low-key additions this offseason that we saw was Case Keenum into the Bears quarterback room, a veteran, been there, done that, somebody who could definitely teach a young guy and be around Caleb. What has it been just like to have him in the quarterback room as a veteran voice as well?
Case is outstanding. Case is highly intelligent. He's got pelts on the wall, and so he provides a perspective that, we can't always provide as coaches, even for Caleb or for the rest of the quarterbacks in that room. He feels like a coach when you're talking to him. He's just been in so many different systems and seen it done different ways. And he even thinks about things that, might be oversight by us. Like, hey, can we simplify this? And you're like, yeah, that's a great idea. So he's been outstanding in the room. He's been outstanding for the rest of the quarterbacks and the whole team. He provides leadership. And I can't say enough good things about Case.
All right, going back to you here for a second, you have this routine, which I found very interesting. You must do something every single day to sweat, and you've done that for 7 straight years. Usually it's a run or a jog. It doesn't matter if you slept 1 hour the night before, you must do this every single day. How did that start, and where did that, I guess, mindset come from?
That started in 2018 at the University of Iowa, and I was basically like, all right, I'm going to do this every day and see how long this lasts, like how long I can do this. And pretty soon it just became a habit. And, that it's something that now I need to do no matter what. When I was in New Orleans, sometimes it would be challenging. I think Sean's famous for some of the late nights we have there. And so sometimes you'd be running with your eyes closed, trying to roll around there's a park across the street from New Orleans that I'd be trying to get a sweat in real quick and get back to my desk. So that I didn't miss anything, but just became a habit and something I do, and keeps my brain fresh, I guess, during the season.
I've not mentioned your age at all in this interview, and that's because you've said age does not matter, knowledge does, and that's something you've carried with you your entire life. You are currently the youngest offensive coordinator in the NFL. Granny Dinsky, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago, is right behind you, but it is something that, week 1, Monday Night Football, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman will mention it. Is that something that you embrace, you tune it out, or use it as fuel? Like, what is your reaction when it just keeps on being brought up?
It really doesn't matter to me. It's kind of one of those things, like the year I was born doesn't really determine how well I can do this job. I'm more focused on trying to be the best for our team, for our staff, trying to do everything I can to put our guys in position to have success. And so it gets brought up. I've been coaching. This is going to be my 10th season coaching. And so I don't really feel very young in it. I feel like I've been exposed to, some football, and I feel really comfortable doing the job. And that's the most important thing.
I mean, it's been a transition in the NFL for the last 7, 8, 9 years where young guys are getting the opportunities and running with it. Ever since Sean McVay became a head coach, it's become the norm, and nobody even talks about it anymore. And I love that. And I love seeing these new generation of coaches coming into the NFL and excelling right away. I did want to ask you because, every single year we go to the NFL Combine, and there are all these guys who are trying to get their foot in the door and get into the NFL, whether it's a coach, an executive, a scout, whatever it is. What would be like the one piece of advice that you would give those people who are trying to just get in?
Be great where you are. Be great where your feet are. Just focus on being the best at what you're doing right now. Opportunities will present themselves. Everybody's journey is different. I was really fortunate to be brought into the NFL at a really young age, but if I didn't get that opportunity, I would have been trying to be the best, wherever my feet were. I think that's the most important thing. Just not looking, too far down the road. Look out the windshield at the road in front of you, and just stay on course and keep going.
2 more things here before I wrap up. I love asking a reflection question to every person who comes up over here. We mentioned being a baseball guy, turning into a coach at Iowa, getting your chance with the Saints and then the Broncos, and now here with the Bears. What would 18-year-old Declan Doyle tell himself right now?
I think he would be proud of where we're at. He would say, keep going.
Love it. Short and simple. All right. Last question here before I wrap this up. This is the question I ask every single guest who comes on the show. This is the NFL Spotlight Show. We love spotlighting people who deserve more recognition. You could pick a player, a coach, an executive. Who is somebody who should be in this seat here in the future?
I think Press Taylor, who is our pass game coordinator, does an outstanding job. I've really enjoyed getting to work with him over the last 6 months. He's somebody that I had been in touch with before taking this job, but never got to work with him. He's a guy that I think should be sitting here talking to you. I think he does a great job.
Love it. Been in Philly, been in Jacksonville, now in Chicago with you and Ben Johnson and the rest of the staff. We are really excited to see how you guys do here this season. Week 1, Monday Night Football, it's going to be here before you know it. Declan, I want to thank you for coming on, talking about your journey, your path, your career, where you are today. It's a pretty motivational one, an inspirational one to see where you are today. And best of luck here this upcoming season in your first season as the offensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Special thanks to Chicago Bears offensive coordinator Declan Doyle for being our spotlight guest of the week. What a career so far for Declan Doyle. And that is now 2 of the youngest offensive coordinators in the NFL on the show in a matter of weeks. We had Grant Udinski in Jacksonville a few weeks ago. Now we have Declan Doyle. And these are the type of guys around the NFL that owners are keeping a very close eye on, because we know these teams are looking for the young, bright offensive mind, and these guys all fall into that category. And Declan's journey so far has been a really cool one, as you guys just heard, going from where he was as a baseball guy to eventually at Iowa to eventually getting hired and being around Sean Payton and Drew Brees and all those great people, and then having Sean bring him on to Denver and continuing to learn from one of the great minds we've had in football, and then getting this job with Ben Johnson and really overtaking what is about to happen in Chicago and trying to create that team into a potential powerhouse offense. He's going to have a very, very large role. We've said it before on the show. We briefly spoke about it in the interview of Declan Doyle. But once you become a head coach in the NFL, once you become a GM in the NFL, you have a million things that come at your desk every single day. You need to have a staff that you're able to rely on and basically give them things to do that you no longer could do because you have so many things going on. And that is going to be a big responsibility this year for Declan Doyle in Chicago, working with Ben Johnson and putting his vision into the offense for every single Sunday. So he's a name to watch over here moving forward, and we're going to be watching very closely the Chicago Bears this season, leading up to Week 1 on Monday Night Football versus the Minnesota Vikings. That will do it here for our Tuesday, August 12th edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. For those who have not realized, the last few days we have been doing our team-by-team previews ahead of the 2025 NFL season. We've already done 4 teams. We started off with the Arizona Cardinals, then we had the Las Vegas Raiders, then we had the New Orleans Saints. Just the other day, we had the Kansas City Chiefs. We're being joined by all these different beat reporters, some of the guys who are truly boots on the ground there every single day, know the team better than anybody. They're the ones joining us here on the show. We will be continuing that over here the rest of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We have the 49ers coming up, the Vikings coming up, and basically the entire NFL over here leading up to the 2025 NFL season. So make sure you are subscribed here on our YouTube page, NFL Spotlight, and we will see all of you here tomorrow morning.